Hi there, I'm nicodehaan, and welcome to Living a Primal Lifestyle, where we explore a return to a more balanced and natural wild world.
To recover our natural health and regain our rights and freedoms, I'm Dahaan, and we come to you today from Winter Wonderland.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day in Durango, Colorado. It's about 25 degrees, and it's been snowing off and on.
For a week.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I've been clearing that driveway 2 or 3 times a day.
At least.
That makes it a little bit easier, except when the plow comes along. Then, they haven't been doing too bad of a job, though. So I'd like to remind you that we're on Living a Primal Lifestyle channel on YouTube, so please hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, hit the like button. That will help our channel grow. And the other thing
And we'd like to see you.
Yeah, that's for sure. And our channel is not monetized, so we post on Facebook and LinkedIn. And all the topics that we talk about today are in the show notes, so you can follow along.
Yeah.
And I thought to start today with this...
Since it is the week of New Year's.
New Year's, yes. This comes from USA Today. What does Auld Lang Syne mean? Yeah. What does it mean, honey?
Yeah, well, it comes from the Scottish, and it means, literally, if you translate it, it means old long since, or old times, especially times fondly remembered, or old or long friendship. For me, I just think of it as being
the old good times. Is
yeah,
what I think of.
Yeah. Should the good times be forgot?
Yeah, they shouldn't be forgotten.
Should not be.
No, then they're usually not forgotten. Let's forget about the bad ones, like the last couple of years of being shut in and everything like that. I thought it was kind of cool that they talked about this, but
it actually, apparently, it's quite an old refrain, and it was memorialized by the poet Robert Burns, who was a Scottish poet, of course, and he translated it it's very slightly different than the original, and he acknowledged when he published it that it was not an original, that it had come from an old song, and basically the first verse and the first refrain are what we're accustomed to. Most people
I don't remember much.
There's about 8 verses,
oh, really?
Okay. But we always sing, should old acquaintance be forgot, never brought to mind, should old acquaintance be forgot, and days of old lang syne. For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet, for old lang syne, for old time's sake, for old friends, for those who are gone.
Yeah, it's just a tradition. I mean, you always hear it on New Year's Eve, and we'll be hearing it again in a couple of days. So
they point out in the article just that the lyrics were intended to be very emotional, and that they were they were meant to evoke feelings of nostalgia, especially memories of good times spent with friends.
Yeah, that's the way we remember it, the good times. In the last couple of years, we've been out to dinner like the day before.
Yeah, we've been doing New Year's Eve.
Yeah, because it's not as busy.
It's not busy.
Easier to get reservations and things like that.
And it's not, they don't have special menus, and the prices don't go up. And,
all kinds of reasons.
There's a lot of good reasons, and we were enjoying that very much.
And before that, we really kind of spend it alone most of the time.
Well, we spend it at home.
Yeah, at home alone. It's 2 of us celebrating and watching an old movie or something like that.
Yeah, well, mostly that was for our own safety. We were concerned about getting out on the roads with people who are celebrating a little too vigorously and indulging in the adult beverages and so on.
Well, now it's a new year for us. It's in a new place, so this will be our first New Year's in Durango.
Yeah,
and we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So let's begin the show. We got a lot of good content here today, and the first one comes from Medium. It's the Golden Healer, the beginning of light therapy. And some of the logic relates to solariums that began around 6000 BC.
In China. In other words, what we're talking about here is the original light therapy, which was the sun.
Right.
And then
in fact, the Chinese enhanced that because architecturally they began building houses facing to the south, which incidentally our house
does.
And the other house was facing kind of southeast.
Yeah.
And we prefer that because the warm sun does come in.
Yeah, and they were talking about heating the house naturally, and that the people they'd build their houses so they had some kind of window facing the sunrise, and
and ideally Socrates said that the house should be cool in the summer and warm in the winter, and nowadays we still believe that. But 25,000 years ago in Greece, to accomplish this was hard because there's no heating systems in any type of AC, of course.
Right.
But being outside is really the whole thing behind this.
And they said with time, the Greeks learned to build their houses, take advantage of the sun's rays during the winter, and avoid the sun's heat during the hot summer, because the individual homes were oriented toward the south. And eventually they had entire cities planned to allow citizens access to the winter sun. So it's just interesting. That kind of leads.
Well, for me, it's interesting because it's commonly known that exposure to the sun nurtured good health.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about 6,000 BC.
Yeah, so this was really common knowledge many, many years ago. And I think it's still kind of lost today because we spend so little time in the sun. Yeah. Of course, coming from Florida, you would think we were out in the sun all the time, but in the summertime, you're in the air conditioning. All the shopping is usually done in malls with air conditioning. People go to the movies, and we spend less and less time.
You're working during the day. You're in an office somewhere or in an enclosed environment.
Yeah, but I also think of the bad press that the sun gets. It's bad for you. You use suntan lotion, which obscures the good rays from the sun, the healing.
Well, let's go to the next article. Speaking of that,
the next article is red light therapy.
This combines the concept of the sun and then expands from there.
Well, of course, without the sun, you're ever struck with this seasonal affective disorder, SAD, commonly known as the winter blues. So especially here in Durango, that we don't have the direct sunlight. And when we're talking about direct sunlight, we're talking about it being noon.
Yeah,
and when it's noon, you get all the good rays, you get the infrared, and you get the vitamin D production. But if you're at a latitude where the sun is at a slant, like 45 degrees, you're not getting that therapy. You're not getting that vitamin D. And this is why, even though you may be out in the sun in a climate like Durango, you're not getting that vitamin D.
Well, let's talk about vitamin D. The first thing, it's very interesting. While we were researching all of this, we were watching some video podcasts and so on. Yeah. The first thing I learned was that vitamin D is not actually a vitamin. Right. That the definition of a vitamin is something that is organic, chemical, that must be obtained from dietary sources because we don't produce them in our bodies. And
so because we can get this from the sun, it's not essentially a vitamin, although if you look at the evidence, then it does come from food also.
Well, there's certain very limited foods.
Yes.
In
no vegetables, no fruits.
There's no vitamin D in any fruits or vegetables.
Not even roots or anything like that. It strictly comes from the
wild fish.
Wild fish.
But it has to be the heavy fat fish.
It has to be cold water
salmon
fish. Which have the oils in it. It also comes from
egg yolks,
which is a big source.
But then one podcast pointed out you'd have to eat what did it say? 60 eggs a day,
something like that.
Yeah, it was in order to get enough. The point is, what you need to do is get some form of. You need to get something into your system so your body can convert it to the vitamin D3 we need.
What you're getting is precursors. And we've known about that because of all the other stuff that we've talked about.
Well, it says the sun's energy turns a chemical in your skin into vitamin D3, which is then carried to your liver and your kidneys, and they transform it into active vitamin D that goes out through your body.
Yeah. And another thing that most articles don't mention, that they mention the fish and they may mention the egg yolks, but if you're eating animals instead of fish, then you get it from the organs, from the stomach linings, from the kidneys, from the liver, from the heart.
of the animals.
Of the animals that you're eating. So those are great sources also. Now, recent evidence suggests that vitamin D may help prevent many disorders such as diabetes, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, bronchitis,
Premenstrual PMS.
PMS, yeah. Increased
blood pressure, strokes, heart attacks, and even cancer.
So low serum vitamin D levels also,
meaning if you're too low,
are also associated with being overweight, abdominal obesity, which is of course the worst kind, metabolic syndrome, stroke, and diabetes. So these are the things that, this is
read the next sentence too. In addition, having lower blood vitamin D levels for a long period is associated with increased heart attacks and all-cause mortality.
Yeah. And this really boils down to me, for me, it really impacts your immune system. Mm-hmm. In other words, your immune system, the reason that when you're deficient and you're getting all these different things like rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, and all these diseases that we just talked about, is because your immune system is not up to optimal.
Yeah, and I was looking at the article talks about, says mostly symptoms of vitamin D deficiency are mild, but to me, bone pain, chronic fatigue, frequent bone fractures, muddled thought processes, muscle weakness, and soft or deformed bones. And then
so rickets, in other words.
Well, yeah, and they talk about. They say even if you don't notice any symptoms, doesn't mean that the deficiency of vitamin D doesn't present serious health risks. Which, in particular, there's a few things here that are children that are of concern. Children may develop severe asthma.
Immune system problems.
Which you were just talking about,
right.
Including your
insulin resistance, impacting your body's ability to process sugar and increasing your risk of other things like
diabetes, multiple sclerosis, and glucose intolerance.
Right.
And that's an interesting combination of things. Osteoporosis, again, the body needing the vitamin D in order to have healthy bones.
Yeah. And, reduced cognitive function.
Yeah, your brain.
So this is stuff that not only when you're young, but as you get older, we think these are just common occurrences. Oh, well, you're just getting old, you're losing your memory or whatever. Right. Rickets, we mentioned. But the other thing that you mentioned yesterday when we were discussing this, less chance of conceiving, having a baby.
Yeah,
that's huge. And if you think about it, all these things are prevalent right now.
Yeah, women are having a lot of trouble conceiving.
Yeah, and this is over the last 20 to 50 years, I would say.
Well, it's certainly the last 30 years, I would say.
Yeah, and these last couple of years, all these things are also making your immune system compromised, which means that you have more chance of getting this disease that's going around.
Any disease,
really. Sure.
Yeah, but it does. I mean, specifically, it says that if there is insufficient sunlight and vitamin D, basically, there's more melatonin in a woman's body, and melatonin is a hormone that actually suppresses fertility. So that's a problem. And then women who get less sunlight reach menopause earlier than those who are exposed to the sun. And men can also suffer because lack of sunlight directly influences testosterone levels. Yeah. So that's a key thing.
And one of the things, of course, that the article mentions here is that you can get this through a sauna, the infrared saunas, which I take on pretty regular basis, 3 to 4 times a week. I'm in the sauna, and I think this really helps my immune system. And also we supplement it, especially I think we used to supplement like about 5,000 IUs, but now since the last couple of years, because of the COVID thing, that we have actually upped it, and I'm taking 15, I think you're taking 10, I believe.
Yeah, 10,000 IUs.
And this is just an extra precaution, especially now that we're in Durango, we know we're not getting that sunlight, but I really do count on the sauna, and I can feel the difference all the time.
Well, it's called red light therapy.
Yeah.
And it says that you'd be surprised to learn that one of the things that we knew and that you kind of don't think about exposure to sunlight first thing in the morning helps you sleep later at night.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's because when that prepares your cells for the effects of UV light later in the day also. And then wavelengths in the evening sunlight also have a natural repairing effect. But it says that's because the red or and infrared wavelengths, which are more highly concentrated morning and evening, have the unique ability to boost mitochondrial function. Now, what's mitochondrial function?
That's your immune
That
system
you're rebuilding.
working. Yeah, everything's rebuilding. I think I remember years ago my dad telling me that every 7 years, every cell in your body is replaced.
Right.
So our body is constantly replacing things, repairing things. But the only time it doesn't do that is when you're digesting food. So it's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, it stops the repair process.
Yeah, because your body's too busy. It takes a lot of energy. The
Yeah,
next article I wanted to go to.
There's an article in here that I did highlight a bunch of information about, so that will follow up from this.
Yeah. This next article comes from grueldavis.com. Anyway, it's in the show notes. Vitamin D protects against and treats COVID-19. Now, this is a panel of people talking in a video, so we're not going to play the video. You can do that yourself at your own time. Very interesting because they really talk about the trials that have been taking place for eons, and some of the new trials that have been taking place have a different slant on it, especially these last couple of years, saying that, some of these trials are kind of just not very well, but it's pretty common knowledge, I think, that vitamin D does help.
Yeah,
and we know that the sun does, especially if you go to countries that people are still living outside, the prevalence of these types of flus are not, they don't get impacted as much. Very much lower level, and we see that in Africa certainly. Not South Africa because they don't do that, but if you're going to the wilds, the people are not getting these diseases, and their general health is always better. They don't contact these, they don't have that annual flu thing that goes around. So all these things that we're getting here and now that we're panicking about are easily taken care of through something simple as vitamin D. It might not be the only thing. We know that zinc and other things,
vitamin C,
and boosting your immune system in other ways is important. But
the
problem I have is that none of these things are talking about. And when we're getting these experts in this video that we listen to, they're really talking about that this is such a help. And why people are not talking about this first.
Or talking about alternative ways of and additional ways to boost your system.
But
and
it should
help.
be the first thing.
Well,
that you think of.
I understand, but I'm saying is that all of these things that we talk about, the remedies that have been around for a very long time, we're talking thousands of years. People knew to go in the sun.
A lot of these things we just did automatically because even if we we sheltered at night, we ate outside, we hunted outside, we played outside, we were around the campfire at night. Maybe we sheltered when there was a storm. But sleeping outside is if you ever go camping and things like that, you know how energetic that is. It makes you feel much more alive. Just eating outside is a energizing thing. So
what I was just pointing out was that what we're talking about is there are a number of things that can help not only prevent you from getting any disease in the first place, but also can help ameliorate the symptoms, can make it much less impactful on you. And vitamin D has been around such a long time, and if you do a little digging around in the research, you'll find there are so many reliable, authentic, well-researched, carefully thought out studies and papers published and videos shown, interviews and so on that talk about the ameliorative effects of vitamin D. And that nobody, as you say, nobody in the quote-unquote health field that's telling us all around the world what to do is even mentioning it. although if you look kind of on the back pages and read between the lines, you find there are some people who are in a position to do so that don't, but privately have admitted that they're taking vitamin D or something of that nature.
So check out the video, and there's a couple others. We watched another one on the Dark Horse podcast that
was very interesting. It's all about vitamin D.
Yeah, and that was some of the same people on this particular one. But check it out for yourselves and make up your own mind and see what's going on. May I remind you that vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin.
Yeah,
and it's important to realize that.
But it's a lot different than vitamin E and vitamin A. Because you can overdose on E and A. You cannot overdose.
Well, E is kind of thought of in the mainstream as a blood thinner. So that's why they think, for me, I don't see, you can take just about as much as E. A is a different thing.
Yeah,
you can definitely overdose on that.
And it gets stored in your fat and it becomes a health hazard rather than a health help.
It can if you overdo it.
Overdo
I don't think many people are overdoing A. No. It's very, very difficult to do.
But the point is that D doesn't act that way. It doesn't get stored the same way, and it doesn't impact on your body the same way. Right. So that's interesting.
So let's go to the next article. This is meatpoultry.com. Sustainable minded.
Excuse me, honey. We should go to how does the immune system work next.
Well, this ties into that.
Okay.
Yeah. Sustainable minded pet parents drive growth in the meatless treats.
And really, it's treats and chew toys, not their regular diet. They tell us in the article this does not apply to the full regular diet.
Well, I don't think anybody's feeding their dogs, broccoli.
No, but it isn't broccoli.
I'm just saying that as a regular meal.
It's plant-based. In other words, we're not eliminating meat from the diet of your pets. Because it's been, and as a matter of fact, the movement has been to do, good organic food, cook it, or give it to them raw, whatever, depending on how it is, and get away from the dry dog food or the pellets and so on.
But why would you? I mean, bones are great.
Yeah.
And little scraps of meat. I mean, you all have little scraps of meat that you throw away. Why not treat your pet? They love that, and it's good for them. Yeah. And these vegetarian little treats are not good for them. Well, they wouldn't eat it naturally.
Here's the thing that I found interesting, because they're talking about, insect-based...
Insect ingredients have been increasingly cropping up in pet nutrition space, including in pet food and treat formulation. In August, the Association of American Feed Control Officials voted to tentatively approve the use of dried black soldier fly larvae in
adult dog food.
Yeah.
Well, here's the point. I mean, fly larvae is protein.
That's right. Yeah. So that would be a good one.
Yeah.
So why is the headline talking about meatless treat?
Because they want it's a bait and switch.
There you go.
It's a clickbait thing, I mean, the point is that they're talking about using insect larvae and things like that only for treats.
But they're also talking about plant protein based treats for dogs. So, I mean, this is the same type of thing as we're trying to get people to eat much more vegetables as a basis and do away with the red meats and the other meats too. Apparently they're not doing away with the fish as much, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the broadcast, because this is just another way of putting it in your face that meatless treats are probably good for your dogs or your cat, and they're probably good for you too.
I don't think it's quite as negative as you're reading it.
Well, why not? Why wouldn't you put up front? I mean, it would be just as easy to put a headline up. They're using insect larvae. That's just as easy to put in your headline instead of meatless treats. Because if you're using insect larvae... It's not
actually a meatless treat.
Exactly.
But I don't think that...
So I think it's a bait and switch, like you said.
Yeah, but it does say, this meat-free trend is best applied to pet treats.
Yeah.
As the complete and balanced nutritional requirements for pet food make meatless formulations much more complex. And I don't see It may happen that if there's no more meat left in the world, that there won't be any option but to feed you.
Well, that's true. But they're also formulating these treats with plant-based proteins, and they're going to shove in the vitamins and things that they think they need, and they're going to be synthetic.
It's a treat. It's this big. You know?
It doesn't matter. It's still not good for you, and it puts you in your face.
But it's not for you. It's for the dog.
Yeah, right. Well, this next article will show you exactly that it's not just the dog, because the next article is the largest burger study ever reveals what type has the most protein. Eat this and not that. So this comes from eatthisan.com. Mm-hmm. So when choosing to chow down on a burger, there's a lot of varieties to pick from. The results of the largest of its kind study in burgers is in, and the results are this. Beef burgers contain more protein, calories, fat, and cholesterol, and less sodium and fiber than the imitation and veggie burgers. So this would sound kind of good too if you're a vegetarian and you're thinking along maybe I should be eating more sustainably, and maybe I should be eating healthier, and this would put you in line with maybe eating some more of these veggie burger type of things.
Well, I think the point of this article is that it's not a proponent of any particular kind of burger, but it does say that ultimately there's a huge nutritional difference in the burger products that are on the market, and that it's important for consumers to be aware of. So the researcher, Alyssa Nolden, is a sensory scientist at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, one of my alma maters.
Yes.
And she found in her research, she focuses on the complexities behind what makes food taste good for people. She said, there are tons of options for consumers to try. They may not be aware of the nutritional differences. We wanted to look at the nutrients, which can sometimes be a lower priority because when they're developing these products, they're much more focused on how delicious does it taste as a meat substitute.
And one of the mentions in here, if you want it to be delicious, you're going to have to put some saturated fat in there.
Exactly, and that was her point.
And the reason this is important is because taste has always driven nutrition until we start remanufacturing food. So in comparison to beef burgers, the study shows that veggie burgers contain the most amount of carbohydrates, something we don't want a high amount of. Vitamins A, we don't want a large amount of. Vitamin C, we do want a large amount. But the least amount of fat, well, I would say if it's the right kind of fat, we want fat in there, and it certainly makes them taste better.
But she says that...
imitation burgers.
Yeah, go ahead.
Such as the ever-popular Impossible Burger, contain the most sodium.
That's a lot of salt.
Yeah, and that's artificial type of salt. Probably
and it's not
good.
It's high blood pressure problem.
It does contain a lot of vitamin D, but this is, again, a synthetic form. Probably not something you want. And potassium compared to the beef burgers. Potassium, again, you're talking about the sodium type of
product. You need some potassium, but not...
Yeah, but these are put in because the plants don't have them. So they've got to... And when you think about all the knocks on processed food, veggie burgers are the most processed, right?
Right, very processed. So, now, the point was that even though it says you might think that an imitation burger is plant-based, as being plant-based, that it will be lower in things like saturated fat, but they put the fat back in. And it, as you say, coconut oil, which can be good, or depending on how it's processed.
How it's processed, but generally the saturated fat in coconut oil has been proven pretty well. It is one of the better saturated fats that comes from a fruit.
Yeah, but you want to be careful about what kind of saturated fat is in the food. You need to look at it. Yeah, because it's in there.
You don't want trans fat.
No,
for sure.
You don't want trans fat.
So this takes us to what you were talking about earlier. How exactly does the immune system work? And this is grunge.com.
Boy, I found this article extremely interesting.
Okay, so start it out.
Okay, so first thing it says is that all day, every day, just as you said, the cells, our body and its 37 trillion cells cooperate to keep us alive, while every second 1 million cells per person actually die. The body's caught in a cycle of incessant cellular death and regeneration. Now, this I didn't know. Neurons, which are like the nerves, last a lifetime. White blood cells last 13 days. And then, and just for the record, you have 38 trillion bacterial cells. You have 38 trillion more bacterial cells than you have human cells, which is fascinating.
2 billion heart muscle cells, 50 billion fat cells. So we can see that probably the neurons,
86 billion neurons.
86 billion. Fat cells, 50 billion. So we have a lot of fat cells in our body, and it's important to understand that for the last 50 years we've been vilifying fat, and people have been going on these fat-free diets, which is a very dangerous thing because this is what your immune system is made. This is how everything gets transported. It gets transported in your blood, which carries some of the fat, but all the little liquids around your cells, all the signaling processes that are used for these membranes to open up and accept things are done through those little fatty acids.
And your brain.
And your brain is telling...
your brain has a lot of fat.
Oh yeah, your brain definitely has a lot of fat.
Yeah, but it's interesting too. It says the immune system is a system. It's a decentralized collection of organs and cells that spread throughout the whole body, and it's not just in one spot, like the brain. And some of the major organs that are involved in the immune system are the thymus, the liver, spleen, and lymph node clusters, which are under the armpits and in the hips and so on. That which makes me wonder, when there's breast cancer, they very often remove lymph nodes, and I'm wondering, well, I have to look into seeing what the impact is on women's body health.
Well, your immune system is directly tied to your lymph nodes. This is how things are released out of the body, besides your urine and going and pooping and things like that.
Says the immune system. Go ahead.
Yeah, the immune system cells start out as stem cells in bone marrow. Of course, we know bone marrow is all the really good fat, right? So here again, we can understand that the whole immune system is run perfectly with the fat running through your body, with your fat cells not being compromised. And I see our society constantly compromising the fat cells by introducing foods that are low in fat, have taken out fat, eat this because it's low in fat, eat your vegetables, it doesn't have the saturated fat, which we know is a hugely important part of the whole structure of the immune system.
Yeah, but it also... There's a whole bunch of foods that people eat that are loaded with fat, the bad fat, as it were, the wrong kind of fat that nobody's discussing.
Right.
And too many.
And also, if you look at the fats in vegetables, they're much harder for us to access. Our body's not really made to access them at the same level as something like a sushi or organ meats, or even a good piece of meat that has some nice saturated fat in it. These things kind of just melt in our body. They provide us with a lot of nutrition, and at the same time, it makes us very satisfied so we don't overeat. The fat cells are the things that signal us and say, hey, you've had enough. And you go, oh man, I feel so good. I've eaten enough, And
I'm satisfied, I'm not stuffed.
And not only that, I don't need to eat more. It's not like having the popcorn in front of the TV and you're eating it and you've probably had enough, but you have another bowl. Because it's just all these things are signaling your body in the wrong way. Because there you have that added salt, and you may put some fake butter on it because you're so afraid of the real butter, which is the thing that probably stopped you eating the popcorn in the first place, back in the old days. Yeah, because you were full.
Well, you said that the immune system cells start as stem cells in the bone marrow. Then they travel through the body using our circulatory system, and they communicate with each other in the lymph nodes. So the system's defenses start with the skin, which of course is the outer shield, and mucous membranes play a big role too, because they can trap bacteria and other threats. And again, as you pointed out, and I think it's important, the mucous membranes do line all the organs, and they occupy the body cavities, which is all part of the immune system.
So there's other things that are going on, antigens and antibodies. foreign body invaders are called antigens, and in the end they come in two varieties, basically viruses and bacteria.
Yeah, this was very interesting to
Yeah.
me and kind of scary.
Yeah, bacteria are fully alive and autonomous, and they can live in either surfaces or inside the multicellular creatures like us, humans.
Yeah, but viruses are technically not alive,
Right,
so they require
really
a host to
disturbing.
replicate,
right, which is us.
and and it's a parasite.
Right,
And they don't make copies of themselves outside of the host.
that's right.
So
they
viruses,
need us to replicate.
yeah,
And
they're
remember that our immune system, these little areas around each cell, which the virus is trying to go into, if it's nice and healthy, it already has memory because of the placenta that the mother had next to the baby, teaching the baby automatically that these things are something that is in our area that we come in contact with, and your body is able to fight it off because there's a memory of it in your blood and in your body.
well, your immune system has learned that particular thing and knows that it's not that what to do.
Yeah, and
when
it's really
it
passed on
encounters.
from the mother,
Right.
and then it's passed on through the breast milk,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's passed on to the things that we eat on a daily basis, along with all the sunlight and everything, and being outside. So this is how the
before
immune
you-
system. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
I know I'm going ahead.
yeah. Let's fill this in a little bit.
Okay.
One of the differences between bacteria and virus. Bacteria, if bacteria makes it past the body's innate immune system, then the white blood cells, also called leukocytes, can just engulf them. It engulfs the bacteria, expels it from the body, and that's
You're
it.
out of here.
But however, viruses are very tricky. They get inside the cells where they can then multiply and replicate, and they're hidden from the immune system. So the white blood cells don't get to them because they're not floating in
And
the blood.
remember when we talked about the vaccines, the vaccine is going into exactly the same place where these viruses go. So this is the way they're attacking and putting a kind of memory in there, but it's the same method as the virus uses, and to me that's kind of a scary thing.
Well, we don't really know enough about it. And
Well, that's the whole thing, and that's why the FDA
or the
hasn't...
long-term effects.
Yeah, and they haven't approved it officially yet. One of the reasons maybe we don't know yet. It might be a couple of... who knows? It might be a couple of decades before we really know what's going on.
What's interesting is the article also talks about the different kinds of immunodeficiencies. It talks
Yeah,
about...
and that's important too, because the primary immune deficiency, by contrast, are caused by the immune system itself. And this is some of the problems that they have discussed in some of these things with different kinds of vaccines, that the vaccines provide some of these deficiencies. We don't know yet.
No, the article says primary immune deficiencies include genetic conditions, defects of the immune system, which can weaken or even cripple its ability to function. There are over 400 disorders classified as primary immunodeficiency diseases. Some are rare, some are relatively common, and some are inherited, and some are not. And
Most
of them
are all kind of new in the last century, too.
Yeah, I don't think people. I don't know. We don't know
Have
what the
they
history
not
of lupus was, for example, 100 years ago. But today, I know a number of people who have been
Right,
diagnosed
so
as
a lot of
having
these things were rare in the past. Was it rare because we didn't have them, or was it rare because they have yet to be discovered?
Well, and it also talks about that some of the primary immunodeficiencies are made worse by the environment.
Yeah, the weaknesses caused by something else other than the immune system include poor nutrition, aging, and we know that people, as they age in our society especially, don't eat as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's
certain
sometimes
medications.
wait. The eating part of that is that your appetite tends to decrease as you get older especially if you're not well.
Right.
And then maybe they're on a fixed income, so they have
Another
trouble
reason.
getting groceries.
Yep.
They're housebound, so they have trouble getting out to get what they need. There are a lot
And
of
also,
reasons.
for the last 50 years, we've been told, eat stuff that's not quite as good for you. Stay away from the meat, the high protein. We know that, in other words, as you get older, you need more protein.
Right.
And we tell old people don't eat as much. So, I mean, there's a lot of things in our society that...
I think don't eat as much can mean don't eat a bunch of French fries with your meat, as opposed to don't eat any meat, you know?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, some of them are inherited. Other thing they mention, besides the poor nutrition and aging, certain medications that cause side effects and infections like HIV, which are directly tied to some of these things that we're seeing now. The immune system disorders. Yes.
Makes it much more difficult to fight off other diseases. So there's a lot to the immune system.
Yeah, and this next article that we're going to talk about, this is how the keto diet affects aging, science says. From Eat This, Not That, again. Keto diet may help you lose weight. However, it turns out there may be another reason to hop onto this food-related trend. So they're calling this a trend, but this is really how our ancestors ate.
Yeah, this is more of a... And it's not so much the keto diet that we adhere to as the paleo diet.
Yeah, well, keto diet really means that you're measuring ketones, and that's the only thing it really means.
So talk about ketones for a minute, because we haven't talked about that in a long time.
Well, ketones are basically made in the liver from the fat that you eat, and they send out things through the body to make you satisfied, to heal things. And, I mean, keto... may have some intriguing and promising benefits when it comes to keeping you healthy and longer. And that's the reason for it. Ketones have anti-aging properties because what they're doing is they're feeding the cells, and the cells respond by being stronger, which means you have much more resistance to any kind of pathogen that may come in and invade your body, especially things that are like seasonal. I even wonder if 10,000 years ago there was a seasonal flu that went around because people were living outside. Maybe there was something coming around, but probably not spread by, most of these things, when you think about it, these viruses start out in a bird or an animal of some kind, and somewhere along the line it makes a jump to something else. Well, and 10,000 years ago, we probably didn't live with animals as much as we do today. And we didn't live as close proximity to ourselves or other human beings. We pretty much stayed in a small clan of 30 to maybe 100 people.
So that's our bubble.
That's our little bubble.
And everybody was...
Yeah, and then we ate from the areas around us, which provided us with the nutrition, and we were outside. So if you weren't outside as much, maybe you were in a northern climate like an Eskimo, and then we got more of that, what we needed from the food, because the food was different. It wasn't as tropical. We ate a lot less, probably roughage and fiber and things like that. We probably ate more meat. But even some of the indigenous people that live in tropical things, they're eating insects, they're eating all kinds of things. And if they're forced to eat the carbohydrate-based things, they do different things to them because they learned that it's easier to digest a fermented food or a soured food. And it will give you the health benefits.
Well, a Stony Brook University professor led a 2020 study that backed up the idea that a diet that is low in carbs may prevent brain-related issues caused by aging. The good news is we may be able to prevent or reverse those effects with diet, mitigating the impact of encroaching hypometabolism by exchanging the glucose for the ketones as fuel for the neurons. Yeah. And as we've talked about before, when you eat carbohydrates, they convert to sugar basically. Yeah. And then if you don't use them, they're stored in the fat. And
just kind of to show you, now I'm not showing this on a screen or anything like that, but if you go to the article itself, it has a nice picture, a couple of pictures here. But if you go to this large picture in the center here, it shows you some eggs in the center. It shows you some little nuts, shows you a little mustard.
Almonds in particular.
And they show you the...
little cheese.
Yeah, a little bit of cheese.
That's Colby Jack
cheese. The meat is kind of on the side, half hidden.
But
the bacon is half hidden.
Bacon is on here.
Yeah, but notice it's half hidden.
Yeah, but there's a big blank space in the middle, too.
Yeah, why? Why not put a slab of meat there, right there? This is what you really need.
Honey.
Well... I'm saying that if you're going to be on a keto diet, you're eating 60% meat, maybe more, whether it's fish or anything else.
So this picture shows some kind of steak. There's
just a slice of it.
Let me just see if I can get the picture at all.
Yeah, just double click on it.
No, it's not going to enlarge.
No.
Okay. It shows some bacon. It shows some an avocado. It shows
some greens,
some berries, and
I just find
and
it
olive
odd.
oil.
You know, if you were thinking about a keto diet, the first thing you do is you put a steak down.
Yeah, of course.
That's just
but
me
remember,
being
this is
annoying.
This is a picture of somebody took a picture of food.
Yeah.
And so and it's a Shutterstock photo, so that means that the person who wrote the article pulled it out of the internet, paid for it, and put it in the article.
Probably so.
So it wasn't intended for this particular article. Let's give these people a little slack. It's New Year's,
I guess so.
Christmas spirit. Yeah.
Okay, so what they're saying is this is backed up by the idea that a diet that is low in carbs can prevent brain-related issues, which you said. The good news is that we may be able to prevent or reverse these effects with diet, and that's the important part.
That's the important part.
Yeah, and keto diet plays an important role in reducing the amyloid plaques that can reverse the neurotoxicity.
And also can reverse.
Also, the neurotoxicity resulting in increased memory.
Yeah.
So all these things that we talk about, the lack of memory and all these things as you're aging, are results of diet.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Is instead of saying, "Oh well, I must be getting old, I can't remember things," and instead of looking for an intelligent or not intelligent, but a sensible approach to see, is there something else I can do to help myself, and I do, in addition to watching carefully what we eat and balancing our food and taking certain supplements and making sure we're getting that vitamin D, I'm working on puzzles. I do jigsaw puzzles for the spatial and motor coordination. It's really good for my brain.
And my puzzle really is jiu-jitsu. You know, it's the same kind of thing. It's like playing chess with live humans.
live pieces, chess pieces.
Yeah.
Live humans.
Well, hopefully. Yeah. Okay, so this last article before we really talk about what's happening in the new year is farm fish breeding with wild fish is changing the life cycle of wild fish. So the bandwagon is really that we need to eat more farm fish. It's very sustainable. We control their diet, such and such. And it's much easier to catch fish who are in a net already, I guess. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Scoop them out.
Yeah, just scoop them out. But the researchers found the biggest impact on wild salmon came early in life.
Yeah, this was a study, let me interrupt you for a second, the Norwegian Institute for Nature Research. Yeah. And they were looking to see what was happening is that some of the farm fish are escaping, making a run for it.
They don't want to be there. They want to go through their natural life cycle.
Yeah, well, apparently their natural life cycle is not the same as the life cycle of the wild.
Well, in fact, they're living a lot shorter, which we know that when you corral even a human being, put them in jail, they're not going to live as long. If you farm animals, don't live as long as the wild, although we do make them sustainable through medications and things like that. But generally, the wild animal is a much healthier animal. We know that, and that's if we got all our food from the wild, our society would be much, much better off.
Well, here's the problem. They found that what's happening is that they are interbreeding, and the hybrid salmon are, they age at a faster pace, as you said. They return to the rivers earlier to lay their eggs. The females grow to maturity, quicker.
Yeah.
They grow to maturity quicker, and then they die quicker.
Which is not something you'd want.
No,
you would think that a salmon, I don't know the life cycle of a salmon per se, but if, let's say, a female would take 2 years to mature before it goes up and spawns. Now it's doing it in 6 months or a year. You would say, well, that's probably not good because it's not living its cycle in the longevity that nature intended.
Well, the worst part is that it puts them, the accelerated maturation process puts them at a higher risk from predators because they're not quick. You know, the little fish are fast and can get away from predators, and apparently sharks or halibut like to eat salmon. So what's happening is that, as you say, they go out sooner to spawn. They become prey for these animals, and it's not. And plus, interestingly, any salmon with a farmed ancestry, as they're saying, they're less afraid of predators, and they're bolder and more aggressive in general. So they don't know, they weren't raised with predators, so they don't understand the need to preserve themselves.
Yeah.
And I guess they feel more invincible.
Yeah. And farmed fish is becoming more and more, it's a lot less expensive, I would think, than if you've got your fish that are closer to the shore, housed in some kind of netting, and now you don't have to power your boat to go out there and get them.
Right.
It's kind of the same thing, reminds me, and you probably know this, back in the 80s, they were putting a lot of restrictions on local fishermen. You're not allowed.
Yeah, limiting the catch
and things like that, where the commercial fish who are catching thousands of lobsters and thousands of fish were not restricted at all. So it never made any sense from a sustainability standpoint.
But it was money.
There you go. And this is what this is about too. It's naturally much more profitable if you can scoop up the fish that are very close to you and are already in nets. You're gonna have no problem catching them. And this is what our world is turning into, and it's accelerating at a massive pace, is what I see. Say the last 10,000 years is about the only history we really have of human beings. We know that we lived way beyond that, but we have very little knowledge of what human beings were really doing 30,000 years ago, especially when you see these things that we can't construct today, like the pyramids and like all these
megalithic
things.
Megalithic.
Yeah. And these people were doing this thousands of years ago. We don't know quite how. We think we have some methods that may work. But why were they making these giant stones when small stones are much easier to move? So you would think primitive people would have figured out that a small stone is a much easier thing. So there must be something to do with, I think, part of it might be spiritually, because I think spiritually is tied to the immune system too. But they had to do it for health reasons, or maybe they saw something that we don't see, that something is happening on a regular basis, that the Earth is going through these phases like it did 10,000 years ago, like the Younger Dryas, where many species, including many humans, were just wiped off the face of the Earth because all of a sudden an ice age.
A cataclysmic event.
Yeah, a cataclysmic, which seems to be timed to that 12,000-year cycle that we always talk about.
In one of these articles, there's a great deal of information about the sun. And it talks about the cycles, and it talks about the, let me see, which one was it? It might have been the red light therapy. Yeah, there's quite a bit of information here about the surface of the sun, the atmospheric structures, sunspots, eruptions, solar flares, the magnetosphere of the Earth, and how the shape of that. And
in fact, we know that Suspicious Observer just put out that disaster 12,000-year cycle. It's about an hour and a half of all. For the last couple of years, he's put out, I think, 40 different ones depicting certain parts of the sun and how it goes and how our ancestors knew this. And he put it all in one film, and I recommend going to Suspicious Observers on YouTube and finding that and taking a look at it. But the reason I mentioned the whole thing is that in the last 100 years or so, these things have become much more prevalent with, as far as farming is concerned. There's less wild animals out there.
And one of the things the article said about the wild salmon, the interbreeding is going to result in a total, they expect, they haven't seen it yet, but they do expect a reduction of the wild population as a result.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but I'm looking at this article here, and it says, one of the things that we talk about a lot, and one of the things we keep an eye on Suspicious Observers is because when there's a solar flare, it says here the Earth's magnetic field extends tens of thousands of miles into space. Many different streams of electrons and protons are circulating within it. Huge electric currents flow around the Earth, affecting their high altitude surroundings as well as our environment at ground level. And it talks about the impact on your health and the impact on electronic equipment and so on.
Yeah.
That when there's a solar flare, we get warnings that that you may have trouble with your computer, or it may not be healthy to go outside. There's so many things. The interaction.
Also, when you're talking about farm things, maybe fish not as much, but like the cows. If you're living in a climate like it is here, you bring the cows into a barn.
Right.
Now, I don't know if there's a wild version of a cow around still. I don't think so.
No.
Because we've been using them for so long. But the wild animals are out there. And these big elk and everything, they cross over these huge mountains at 13, 14, 50,000 feet. They're strong animals. They survive the winter outside. They know how to do this instinctively, where you put a cow out to pasture and let them try to survive.
Don't feed them.
Yeah, and they're the reason we house them is because they're going to die otherwise, probably.
Yeah. Well, here's what it says. Energetic atomic particles and X-rays from solar flares and other disturbances on the sun often affect radio waves traveling the Earth's ionosphere, causing interference, even blackouts of long-distance radio communications. Disturbances of the Earth's magnetic field by solar phenomena sometimes induce high-voltage fluctuations in power lines, leading to blackout cities, and even seemingly unrelated activities such as the flight of homing pigeons. They talk about when whales are beaching themselves, that it's because their sonar systems have been interrupted.
Yeah, we know that the magnetic field has been moving like crazy over the last 150 years, and this is one of those things that Ben on Suspicious Observer has said that usually it only lasts 50, maybe 75 to 100 years before the poles start to flip, and now we've been here for about 150 years. And there's like three poles. There's a geographic pole, there's a magnetic pole, and then there's another pole. Well, we have the north and the south magnetic poles. They both seem to be moving, and they both
they're the ones that move.
Yeah, and they're the ones that are moving right now towards the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, where they flip.
Yeah, that's the theory, is that when they reach each other, that's when the flip takes place. Anyway, maybe I'll put that in the show notes too, that disaster prediction little movie. It's a good thing to watch and open your eyes to all kinds of possibilities.
Well, anyway, the red light therapy article has a great deal of information.
Yeah, and all these articles are really kind of tied to each other, because we're talking about the immune system, we're talking about staying
more natural
healthy. Yeah, natural ways of staying healthy, and that's what we want, and that's why we have this program. This is why it's Living a Primal Lifestyle. It's our first lifestyle, and we're coming up to a new year, so we don't know exactly what we're doing. We know we're going to be staying here in Durango. We love it. I got some really great exercise. People. I've had several people asking me, "You want to borrow my snowblower?" And I'm out here. Forced exercise.
Well,
it's a really good exercise. You're using your core if you're doing it correctly. All I have is a shovel, and I've been shoveling like crazy for the past week, and it looks like starting tonight.
Now it's starting to snow again.
It's going to be about 3 days, and I think I probably put maybe 7 or 8 inches on the side of the house.
It's surprising how much dumps every time it snows.
And I just want to keep that driveway clear. It also helps that the snowplow is doing a really good job too, and not stacking too much up in front of that driveway.
Well, but the point is that you have a plan, you have a strategy, and the strategy is...
First of all, I enjoy it. It's a little alone time for me, and it's exercise, and it's kind of a forced exercise. Well, I have to do it, but I'm enjoying the heck out of it. Whether it'll get old real fast.
I was going to say, this is your first adventure with...
Yeah. But I remember one of the things that one of the reasons we came here, one of the reasons we went on this diet, And the reason I started jiu-jitsu is because I wanted to feel like I was 10 years old again. I wanted that eternal youth kind of thing. And shoveling snow is what I happened to be doing in northern Canada at 10 years old. And I was the one who always did the sidewalks. We really didn't have a driveway in those days because cars weren't as plentiful. But I remember making snowmen. I remember making igloos. I remember making our skating rink every year. And I remember doing a lot of shoveling. I don't think I was as enamored about it at 10 years old as I am today.
Yeah,
but who knows how long
if
it'll
you let
last.
me interrupt here for a second.
Sure.
The point is that what you do is every time we've been kind of having intermittent snow showers, as it were, but maybe when it's steadily snowing, you went out every hour and you used the shovel as a plow, and you just you pushed it over and then you picked it up and put it on the side.
Well, 2 inches at a time is a lot easier than 8 inches.
Well, of course, and we didn't even. And then you were watching we have neighbors that have every type of snowblower up to and including a very large tractor which has a plow on the front and a plow on the back and a snorkel that it blows the snow out of in the back. And
people have got great toys here.
Yeah, they do. But we haven't really needed it, and it's worked out better because right now, because we face southeast again, and as soon as any kind of sun comes out at all, the driveway, once you've got it cleared, it melts. Yeah. And right now we can see the concrete surface of the driveways, and the walkway's completely clear. So it's a matter of how you approach it, really.
And your mindset. I mean, if you say, "Oh, I have to do this again," then it's going to be a problem. But if I'm saying, "Okay, a couple more inches, I better go out there and take care of it," because it's going to be much easier now, and I do enjoy it, and it gives me a little alone time, and it gives me exposure to the outside and the cold. Which I really like. And another thing I've been doing a lot of is cold showers, and I did it in Florida, but it doesn't get that cold in Florida.
The water isn't that cold.
But it is icy here, and to stay a minute and a half under the cold with your head and neck and your arms and everything is it's your breath all of a sudden is taken away, and when that slows down is when I know I've had enough. When your body kind of says, "Oh, okay, I'm used to this now," and that's the kind of thing I want, and that's the kind of thing I'm always seeking to stay healthy. And this is one of the things you can almost feel it. It's like laying in the sun for 15 or 20 minutes. You can feel the energy, and you can feel the change that takes place in your body, and that's what I want.
I like to ground myself, and one of the things that I did when we first got here was I reached out and touched some of the aspen trees, just put my hands on the aspen trees. And I could feel the energy field, and I could feel the liveness of the tree, and kind of a feeling that the sap was circulating and things all was well. And it was really a very nice experience. And then when we did our hike in Sedona, I put my hands down on some very large boulders to see about grounding myself for a few minutes when we got to the top of the climb. And I felt the energy, but it was nothing like the alive tree versus the rock that wasn't a living
well, you're
being.
Grounding yourself. It's a little different process, but all of it's alive. Everything is alive.
There's energy flowing. I could feel it.
It just moves at a different pace.
Yeah.
The rock is a very slow mover.
Yeah, it was interesting.
That's the show today, folks. So I appreciate you sticking around and take a look at those show notes. A lot of information in there, and you can kind of make up your own mind what's going on in the world. And I guess from now, we'll see you on 2022.
We'll see you next year.
Yeah.
I hope you have a great New Year's. Be careful with yourselves.
Stay healthy.
And find joy. Celebrate. And be ready for a positive outlook and new adventures in 2022.
See you next time. Bye-bye.